identifying their workforce needs moving forward. But at the end of the day, there was okay, we know what the jobs are, now what? So therein lies the need for this sort of training so that everyone at all of your campuses can help your students connect with the opportunities that exist across the state, both at Wright-Patterson and across the state. We have many, many federal opportunities. So, and it's worth saying, and I'm sure Cassie's going to say this again, that what she's going to walk you through is very Air Force specific. It's still USAJobs, and the USAJobs interface will look very familiar as your students are looking for jobs. But as soon as you start to click on apply for a job, that's when the application starts to look a little bit different based on the federal agency that you're applying to. So just want to make sure that you all know that, before we get started today. So very interested in your feedback moving forward. We're going to send you a little survey after today so that we can continue to improve upon this training as we move forward. I already mentioned the regional training. And now if I can draw your attention very quickly to the workforce, the federal employment website that we developed at SOCI. If you go to our website, the soci.org website, you'll see a workforce solutions tab. And as part of that tab, there's a federal employment pull down menu. And if you click on federal employment, we tried to make this website very easy for your students to understand how best to get to internships within the federal government, and then how to get to full-time work as well. You will notice too under the resources that Cassie's slides from today are already out there. So please feel free to share those with your students as they're going through the process of applying for jobs on USAJobs. And we also added a section on specifically searching for jobs. And that is on that first page on the website. Your students can search by major or they can search by agency. And the reason why we wanted to do this is to give them as many ways to get to the positions that they're looking for as possible. And also to make it really obvious how many different federal agencies that we have in the state of Ohio, which I think a lot of people aren't familiar with the numbers. We have quite a few federal agencies, as you can see by the link there on that website. So I'm also interested in your feedback on the usability of this website. We want to make it as simple as possible for your students to connect with the opportunities. So I don't want to talk for long because I know that Cassie has a really robust presentation to give to us today. So I just want to take one more minute of your time. We're about to launch into Cassie's presentation. But what I want to do is make sure that everybody understands how to ask a question if they want to ask a question. So everybody should have a chat box on their screen. And if you could chat your question, just do it to everyone. And Erin Burdett will be capturing the questions and then getting those to Cassie so that we can just be coordinated as we're doing that, since we've got 48 folks online right now. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Cassie and have her start the presentation. So Cassie, thank you again for being with us today. We really, really appreciate it. And if everybody can go on mute so we can reduce the amount of feedback, and we'll turn it over to Cassie. Cassie, over to you. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you, Cassie. Thank you for the invitation to do this for you all today. To create their profile to begin with, what they need to upload, how they search for jobs, what they need to do when they're looking at the jobs, actually reviewing the job announcement, where we will look at preparing their application to make sure it successfully gets submitted, as well as giving you some tips and tricks on just the resume itself to help them ensure that they're getting all the information that they need. What happens after they submit their application as well. Many times applicants, their biggest questions are, okay, great, I've submitted my application, now what happens? So we're going to take a look at all of these different topics from beginning to end. So we will hit them all. And I can, sorry about that, Cassie, I'm looking at you right now. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so first of all, it's USAJobs.gov is the website that your students will go to look at jobs. The very first thing that they're going to want to do on that home screen is start out by creating their profile. So they'll click on that tab and it will start asking them to create a username and password. I strongly recommend that they just use their email address as their username and a password that is easily recognized, because that is something that they're going to need over and over again, and having to reset your password every time you apply for a job can get lengthy.
Hey, Cassie, the slides aren't showing.
Oh, okay. Hold on just a second. Let's go back here. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, I started seeing her. Apologize, everyone. Can you see them now?
Perfect.
Sorry about that. All of a sudden, I saw Cassie Barlow's face, but the slides disappeared. So I apologize for that. So here, in order to, you'll create your profile to create your account first, and it has a series of security questions that you'll have to set up. I recommend that you use your students use the text option, because everybody always has their cell phone readily accessible. So they don't have to click out of USAJobs and get into their email to get the activation codes. They can get them sent to their phones. And it makes things a little bit faster for them. Once they're in and created their account, they create their profile. Here is where the students are going to put in their name, their social, all those contact informations. They'll do a backup email address if they have one. One of the key things on this page that is important for them is there are going to be a list of eligibilities. Most of your students are current students or they're getting ready to graduate. So when they're going through the list, if they were ever military, they would select their military preferences, if they're military spouses. Students, obviously, if they're current students, they'll click the eligibility for a student, or if they're getting ready to graduate, a recent grad. This here will help them when they go to search for jobs as well. So it's part of the whole process that some of the things as they're building their profile that they do ahead will help quicken the process when they do go to search for jobs and apply for jobs, because anything they input now will populate through to their actual application in the process. Once they're done going through and putting all their preferences, their eligibilities, demographics, they're going to then click the next button to continue building their profile. Now, here is where the next step is to upload any documents. And you're going to look first at their resumes. There's two ways that they can do their resumes. They can upload a resume that they've created themselves. They can upload up to 10 resumes at one time. So for each position that they're applying for, they tailor that resume towards that position and they can attach those resumes. Or they can use the resume builder that is in USAJobs. The resume builder goes through each section that would be on a resume. They'll input the data, and then it creates a printed PDF of their resume. And then they can build their own resume from that. Either way, it is acceptable forms of resumes. That's their first priority, is to kind of get their resume input. Once they've attached it here, we'll go through the next steps and we'll show you where they actually attach which resume they want to to their actual application. Here, this is just putting it in their profile. The other documents that you may need to upload into your profile would be college transcripts. Most of your applicants are going to be students, so they're going to want to include their transcripts. They don't have to be official transcripts when they initially apply. It does make things a little faster and easier if their transcripts are official, but it is not a requirement. If they were ever military, this is where they're going to put their DD 214. If they've ever been, a lot of college students do our Pathways internship program, so they may have an SF-50 from prior federal service. Here's where you'll put all those documents into their profile. Now, just because they're in their profile does not mean it's attached to their application. This is just merely into their profile, so they don't have to always upload and scan every time that they apply to positions. So, and as students progress in their college programs, if they go on and get a master's, they'll want to include the additional transcripts and make sure these documents are as updated as possible. Once you've uploaded everything, it's always good to go back and make sure you can read the documents. Many times you'll scan something, save it, and when it gets uploaded, it can get distorted, or the text isn't very legible because it's really too light. Make sure everything is viewable on the documents. That way, when you submit them, we don't come back and say we can't read the documents, because you could possibly get screened out if you don't have the documents there, such as if you're saying you're a veteran or you're a student, but we can't read your transcripts. That can cause you to be ineligible for positions. As well as you cannot upload any encrypted or password protected documents. So sometimes when you email documents to and from people, they're password protected or encrypted. This system does not accept those documents. It will give you an error message saying it's not in the proper format and not allow you to upload the document. We also caution students that anything with Privacy Act information, with social security numbers, date of birth, things of that nature, that they do black those out on the documents, so that because you are putting them on the web, we don't want to put any PII information out there that could possibly get intercepted for them. If they get hired onto a position, then they would just provide the documents with the unredacted information to the staffing specialist. When you're on the USA homepage and the students are getting ready to, they've built their profile, they've uploaded all their documents, and they're ready to search for jobs, they need to ensure that they're logged in, because you don't want to log in, do all this searching for jobs, and then find out you're not logged in and have to back up and go through the login process. You want to be ready to go ahead and select the job you want, hit submit to apply, and proceed. Cassie also mentioned these filters previously when she spoke. When you're looking at the screen and you're searching, you can reduce things down to only positions that are open to students, to veterans, open to the public. You can do it by location. So if you're wanting, the student wants to move to Hawaii, they can look for only jobs that are in Hawaii. They can go by job series. So if you're only looking for HR, you can limit it down to only HR positions. If you want to work for the Army, you can limit it down to Army, Air Force. So those filters help to filter down so that you're not looking at thousands of jobs. You're only looking at jobs that you're interested in. Once a student has found a position, now they need to really take a look and read through the announcement itself. There's a lot of information in an announcement. Points to tell them, okay, do I qualify? Do I not qualify? Things that they can look at to put in their resume. There's sections such as location. Where is the position located? That way they know. Some announcements are for multiple locations. So making sure that their location is there that they are interested in. There's a brief job overview, just kind of over what exactly the position mission is. The duties, which is an area I strongly recommend the students read thoroughly through, because this tells you what is it that the job actually does. What are you going to do in the position on a daily basis? And what you can use that information is, have you done any of that work? Have you done those duties? If you have, then you want to make sure that that's highlighted in your resume, because that's things that they're going to be looking for. Job requirements is another key area for students to take a look at, because this tells you what is required to do the job. So for some positions, like our engineering positions, all require engineering degrees. So one of the requirements is going to be a bachelor's in engineering. And it, depending on the type of engineering, it could be electrical engineering, it could be chemical engineering, any one of those areas. And that will allow the student to know, okay, I have a biomedical engineering degree, but they're looking for an electrical engineer, so I don't have that proper degree. As well as it'll talk about what kind of security clearance the position requires. They don't require you to have it when you apply to the position. What they require is that you're able to obtain the security clearance. So for most people, it's not hard to get a security clearance, but there have been times where if someone has felonies or a really bad credit history that could hinder them from getting a secret clearance, this will allow you to know, okay, it needs a secret clearance, maybe I shouldn't apply. There's also some additional information if the position has anything special that's required. We have positions that are like nurses that require some public trust because they deal with children. So there's different requirements that are required. Our lifeguards require certain levels of certification, CPR, first aid, those type of things. And the last section, and one of the most important sections, is what documents are required. Because this section tells you as an applicant what you have to supply documentation-wise for the announcement in order to even meet the basic requirements. If you're qualifying based on education, that's going to be your transcripts. If you're a veteran, it's going to be your DD-214. Every job announcement requires a resume. So it will list all the required documents that are required for the position. So it takes some time with each announcement to read through everything because they aren't short, but it will save a lot of stress in the long run when the applicant knows for sure they qualify, they have everything that they need to apply. So when they hit that application button, they're ready to go. They have everything and everything is ready, and they do feel that they will qualify for the position. When they're ready, they've selected a job that they're ready to apply to. That's when they're going to hit apply to that position. The first screen that pops up for everybody is basically saying you're starting the application process. Do you want to proceed? And you can make it so there's a little checkbox you can check so you don't get this pop up every time you apply. But the first time they apply, it will pop up. And it just lets them know that you're ready through the process and you're applying for the job, just in case that wasn't their intent when they were scrolling through things. When the first step before, as I told you, when you created your profile, you uploaded documents. Well, the very first step you're going to do in USAJobs when you apply to a position is select which documents you want to submit with your application. So if you have 4 or 5 resumes, here's the time where you're going to select the resume that you want. Then you're going to select any additional documents, whether it be transcripts, DD-214, cover letters, any of those that you want. Documents that you want to attach. If you don't click them, they won't attach to your application. So anything you have in your profile that doesn't pertain to the position you're applying to, you just leave that unchecked, and then you hit save and continue, and that will send your documents forward. As you're going along, these screens will come up. Do you want to continue, letting you know that the documents are being transferred from USAJobs to Application Manager, because once you do a certain portion within USAJobs, and then it sends you based on the organization that you're applying to, Air Force, Navy, Social Security. At this point, you're sending it to the agency's website for application. So for Air Force, it's Application Manager. And this is how it tells you that you're continuing on to Application Manager to continue filling out your application for that position. Once you get to Application Manager, it lets you know, yes, your documents have come through and you can continue. So you will just hit continue and it will take you to the actual application process. Due to the heightened wanting to make things as secure as possible, having your social, date of birth, and PII information out all the time. When you first fill out your first application, it's going to have you verify your date of birth, social, and things to make sure that you are the person who's trying to apply to the position. It doesn't ask you for in the past, you used to have to input your full social, date of birth, and everything every time you apply to a position. Now it just wants the bare minimum to verify your identity when you're applying for positions. The next screen is going to be your biographical information. This is all information you put in when you created your profile. So this is where the reason you build your profile is it saves time every time you're applying for the job. You don't have to go in, put your name, address, email address. It's already built into the system. At this point, it's just wanting you to verify. If you no longer use that email address, or your address has changed, or your phone number has changed, this is your opportunity to change it on this application, and just to make sure there's no typos or errors. The next portion of this is going to be a questionnaire. The first section of the questionnaire is your eligibilities. When you built your profile, we discussed how you could put whether you're eligible for military, student, military spouse, those options. If you clicked any of those that you're eligible, then when you get to this portion of the assessment, it's going to ask you what type of vet you are. Were you a disabled vet, which would be 10 points? Were you just a 3-year, 4-year vet? Those things. What type of mil spouse you were? Those questions will come up. If you didn't answer anything to any of those eligibility, then you won't have these questions, which is a big change from how the process used to be. You used to have to go through every type of eligibility and mark yes or no, yes or no. Now, it only comes up if you self-identify that you're eligible for those eligibilities to apply. And the key thing here is when you're looking at the announcement, if it says under the eligibilities, if one of the eligibilities that you're eligible for isn't listed, then you're not eligible to apply to the position. There are some positions that are open to all U.S. citizens, so as long as you're a citizen, you can apply. Some that are only open to prior military, current internal employees, and it'll say that under the eligibility section. So that's key that they check that section, and that's why you see it in your profile, you'll see it in the announcement. So just to reiterate and connect those so that people are aware what truly eligibilities are, because many times people will just click because it apply to everything, and this section will help screen out people who aren't truly eligible for positions. So if they put no to some of these things, it'll automatically screen them out before they even get in front of someone in my office. Area job announcements, it's for different locations. And so next it'll ask you, well, what locations do you want to apply to? So if it's open to Scott Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base, and Wright-Patt Air Force Base, you're going to check mark any base that you want to apply to. So if you don't want to apply to Eglin out in California or Florida, you just wouldn't select that location. So this is key for those that are applying to announcements that are in multiple locations to make sure they're applying to the correct location. The next portion of the assessment is going to be questions on the requirements of the job. So if they need a degree, it's going to ask you, a series of questions about your education level. Do you have a degree? Will you have a degree within so many months? You don't have a degree at all. Those type of things to determine whether your qualification levels, because they're looking for the best qualified. So how they answer the questions will determine whether they're found highly qualified or not, based on their self-assessment. This is purely off of what the applicant states. So it'll go through different duties, a lot of the duties for the position, and asking whether they are an expert at it, or they've done it on a daily basis but with supervision. They've had training but they've never actually done it, or they have no training or any background in it. And so based on those questions and how they answer them, it will determine whether they are found highly qualified or not. Now, a student can go through and put expert on everything, but if their resume does not support their answers to this assessment, the staff and specialists will still screen them out. So they can score themselves as high as they want, but they truly need to make sure that their answers match what their resume states. So making sure that if they say they're an expert in an area, that they can translate that on their resume and back that answer. Once they're done with all the questions, and they have to make sure that they answer every question, they're going to click continue. Now this is the third time they're going to see their documents that they've uploaded. Here they're going to label the documents that have transferred over into Application Manager. So they're going to label the document that's their resume. If they have a transcript, they're going to label it transcript. If for any reason they realize, oh, I didn't upload my transcript, I need to upload my transcript to this. This screen allows them to go in and add those documents. So if they got through all this process and then realize, oh no, I missed something, they can still upload that document here. They upload it and then they label it, telling the person what the document is. Any required documents obviously will be in red and say required. If there's a document that they have that doesn't fit one of these labels, and they truly want it looked at, just have them label it the closest to it. So if it's a VA letter, they're going to put that they can put that with their DD-214 because they correlate together. If they don't label the documents, they will not transfer to their application. So it's key that this is like the third time they're looking at this, but they need to make sure that they're labeled and hit continue. That way their documents are attached to their application as they're completing it. If, again, just kind of go through, make sure they're all labeled and continue. What's nice about this system is if they've missed a question in their assessment, or there's a document that they didn't label, on the next screen it'll say, this is the status of your application to review. Verify that you have green check marks and everything's there. And then once they verify that everything's there, they can hit submit. But say their assessment has a red mark next to it. If they click on the assessment, it will take them to the part of the assessment that they didn't complete. So if they missed a question, or they got too click happy and clicked over, helps them ensure that their application is complete, because they can review everything that they're submitting. So the answers to all their questions, everything they've attached, before they final submit it to us. Once you've hit the submit button, a screen similar to this will pop up giving you the application process, showing that your application status is received, that it's being processed. The system does have to scan the documents through an antivirus. So initially, when they look at the status of their application, it could say incomplete. Once everything is done being scanned, they should be able to go back in and it's saying that it's been received with their application in that regards. We strongly recommend for students or anyone applying to jobs that you check your status of your application before the announcement closes. So as long as you're not applying on the day the announcement closes, you can go in the next day and make sure that it's still not showing incomplete, because if it's still showing incomplete at that point, then that means you're missing something. And if you're missing something and the announcement's still open, then they can go in and make changes to their application. It does not delete any documents they've submitted. So if they decide they want to upload a new resume, they can do so, but the old resume will be in their application package as well. So we strongly just recommend this confirms their application, but just to make sure that they go through and just double check to make sure that everything flows through correctly. Once they're done, they've applied to the position, there are positions that require an additional assessment, and it's called the US Hire Assessment. Now, this is not a fun assessment. It can take up to 4 hours to complete. It's very lengthy. It is required for certain positions to be completed, and if they don't, then they won't be considered for the position. These type of assessments are not necessarily job specific. You'll go through and answer questions. If Sally, Marcus, and Darren are working on a project and only Mary and Donnie can talk to one another, it's very reasoning type of skills, reading comprehension. So it's very psychological type of a test. And they'll get an applicant, once they submitted their application, within a day should get an email to their box saying that this is a requirement, that they have to go in and complete the US Hire Assessment. It can take a while, so they do need to make sure that they have, and it will tell them, don't sit and start taking this, because once you get started, you have to complete it. And once they've completed it, their score is automatically assessed and attached to their application. They only have to take the test once. So once they've done it, they won't have to see and do that testing again for positions. So if they are applying for 4 or 5 different positions that all require the test, they only have to take it once. The system will recognize that and attach that to their application. This assessment is one that gives a lot of people trouble because they don't understand to look for it. You're obviously, for positions like lifeguards, nursing assistants, things like that, they're not going to require this type of assessment. You're going to find that most of the positions are going to be more in leadership roles where they require this assessment. So just let your students know to look out for the assessment in their email and check their spam for a few days. Usually the email comes through within 24 to 48 hours after they submit their application. So to know whether that they need to take this assessment, and make sure that you stress that when they do choose to sit down and take the assessment, it is going to take them some time, up to 3-4 hours to complete. So they will need a quiet space. There are sections that are timed. So if they have other, can't retake it if you have a section where something happens. So not all positions require it. This is an Air Force requirement. So just have them be aware that that's a possibility that they have to take the assessment and to check their emails for that within the next couple of days following their application submission. When they're in USAJobs, they can look under their applications when they've applied for positions and see their status. They can check this all the time. The information in here is only as good as the staffing specialist inputs. So if the staffing specialist, when they're going through the process, doesn't update certain things, this can lag in time to be updated. But it's important that they look at that because especially this is the screen they'll go to after they submit their application, just to make sure that it doesn't say incomplete, that it does say received and completed when they're processing their applications and checking status. They're also going to get via email 4 different emails through this process. The first email they'll get this as soon as they apply. It's going to say that the application was received. So after they hit submit, within a couple minutes, they should get the email stating that their application was received. Once the announcement closes and the staffing specialist has reviewed resumes, they'll get a second email letting them know whether they were found qualified or not based on how they completed the questionnaire and that their application is at the reviewed stage. This one should come shortly after the announcement closes. The following notification will be whether they made the referral certificate. What that means is their application has been reviewed, they meet the qualifications, and they were found amongst the highest qualified to be reviewed further through the selecting official. The last notification will be, if they're not selected, they'll just get a notice saying someone else was selected and they were not selected at this time. If they're selected, they'll get a tentative offer letter. So those are the 4 notifications that are sent out based on the process of the announcements. Now keep in mind, you're not going to see a referral 2 days after the announcement closes. There will be time in between because if someone faxes in their application, they have to give time to make sure that everyone's applications have all got married up, that their information is there. After the announcement closes, the staffing specialist will review the resumes and all the attachments for qualifications and that the applicants meet the eligibility to apply to positions. A lot of times we find that when they're applying, they're not truly eligible to be looked at. So they'll look at all of that information, create a list of all the highly qualified applications, and send those to the hiring official. The hiring official at that point, once they receive that list, they have 15 calendar days to make a selection. However, there are unforeseen circumstances that do arise that may require them to be given an extension of an additional 10 days. So in essence, it can take up to 25 days for a selection to be made. Supervisors can do face-to-face interviewing. They can do phone interviews, or they could just purely go off resumes. So it's important and key that students work really hard and make sure all their information and their resumes show a well-rounded employee that they are, because that's what they're looking at first. So, and then there are some positions that require panel interviews. So setting those up, getting all the people coordinated to be there, as well as the applicants, can take a little bit more time. And so that's why it can take up to 25 days for them to make a selection. Then obviously the pre-employment process starts with everything through that. If students are having trouble applying to positions or they have questions about a specific announcement, each announcement, there's a phone number on the announcement. Tell them don't worry, just give them a call. They'll be happy to answer any questions that they can. I strongly recommend that you tell your students the first time they apply to a position that they do contact that the next day after they've applied and before the announcement closes, that they do contact the number on the announcement. Just ask them, did I apply correctly? Are all my documents there? Just to make sure that everything runs smoothly for them on that first time. If they wait until they get that first notification that they're not referred because they're missing a document, they can't do anything about it at that point. So it's best that they verify that when they first submit their application, because once the announcement closes, no changes can be made to an application. Staffing specialists cannot make changes to questionnaires if they answered a question wrong or incorrectly. All of that has to be done before the announcement closes. That's why we encourage students to make sure all their documents are legible and able to be opened, that there's no issues with that, and that they don't forget any of the required documents that are required for the position. One thing a lot of people ask, not just students, is when you're applying to federal positions, what format, how should they write their resume? One of the biggest thing, and that's different between writing a federal resume or writing a resume for a non-federal agency, is that there's no page limit. And we want more of a narrative than just a brief summary. When you're looking at the duties on the announcement, you're going to look at trying to make sure your resume reflects that you've done those duties. So we don't want to use any acronyms or any abbreviations. Like the suggestion on the slide, the first statement is very vague. Over 5 years managing budgetary programs. Well, what budgetary programs did you manage? Because there's a lot of topics can be very broad. I'm going to use human resources as an example here. What I do as an HR specialist is not what my neighbor does. We have a staffing office. They do recruitment and placement. They do all the job announcements, qualifying. I don't. I work on the security, and once people are hired, I work with pathway students and managing that program. So the type of HR work that we do is different. So using a narrative is more detail oriented on what the different things that they use. Obviously, that's where you're always going to tailor your resume to the position that you're applying for. So if I'm applying for a human resource position, I'm going to go into all the positions that had highlight my human resource duties and still mention the other duties that I did that don't apply, but not necessarily make them as detailed as I would if they applied to the position. Because you always want to show all your work history that you've done. Don't leave any gaps. But I'm going to go more into detail to things that apply to the position that I'm applying to and shrink down the things that truly don't apply. Many positions, you'd be surprised at the duties and how they overlap into other areas and give you experience that may apply to positions that wouldn't other necessarily be applicable that you would think so. So we're looking more for a narrative instead of, short, sweet. I know a lot of people come with a one-page resume, and I tell them to go back and start over because I've not seen, the only time I've ever seen where it's truly a one-page resume would be a student fresh out of college who's not really had any work experience other than internships and things that they've done throughout their college career that may not have worked in high school. But typically when you have students who like engineering or any of those areas, they've done internships with a lot of different experience over the 4 years when they're in a position. So they're going to need to include that in their resume in a little bit more detail. Experience and things throughout their education. So we're looking more at that narrative process. One last tips and tricks for applying is you can set up job searches, where anytime a position in your search criteria becomes vacant, that you get an email alert. So if you're looking for HR positions, you can set it up so that anytime that those positions become vacant, you get notified. You can tell how often you want to be notified. You can make changes to that periodically. It will help reduce the amount of sorting and things when you do go to look, and help students to not miss out on opportunities because they can't get online today to check to see what's available, because new announcements come out every day. They're constantly working on announcements. So you could go in first thing in the morning and see nothing, but come 2 o'clock, you could see a whole bunch. So because they're constantly being worked, new announcements are out there. This tool allows them not to miss those opportunities to apply to different things within their search criteria. That is all that I have. I will turn it over to see what questions that we have.
Cassie, if I could jump in right here. This is Cassie Barlow. That was incredible. Lots of great information, and I see several questions that Erin will walk through with you. I just wanted to mention on that last slide the tips and tricks on the being able to save your search. Really important, I think, for students to, especially when you're really in the very hot search for a job as you're getting close to graduation. I would set that up for every day, to send you an email every day. And the reason why I would say that is because there's many jobs, as Cassie can confirm, that are sometimes advertised for a very short period of time. And if you set it up for a week to send you an email every week or every other week, you're going to miss out on some jobs. So very important to look at that regularly. So Erin, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thanks, Cassie. That was awesome.
Yes, thank you. So there were a few questions that came in. So the first question, how far back should a person go back on their resume? We typically advise 10 years. If some of the pertinent experience is further back, do you recommend going back further?
That's actually a really good question, because when I became a staffing specialist, I was looking at resumes and I had people who had stuff that was 20 years ago. And my trainer at the time said anything over 10 years old can be used as generalized experience, but not specialized experience. And what's meant by that is when you're looking at, for instance, tech as an IT specialist, if they've done it 20 years ago, obviously technology has changed and things have improved. So that knowledge is good that they have that basis, but it's not going to necessarily qualify them for the position. So 10 years is what we recommend that you don't go back prior to, unless it's something that would be generalized knowledge that hasn't changed. But anything else, 10 years is as far back as you would want to go.
The next question that came in was, is there any prep for the assessment?
No, you can go to opm.gov and search US Hire, and it will tell you a little bit more detail about the assessment. But no, there's no way to prep for the assessment. I've taken it twice, and it was slightly different each time. So no, unfortunately, that's one it's going to be a surprise. People shouldn't stress over it. Some of the questions will be, which is more likely to be your answer. It gives you a scenario and it gives you different answers. Now, I'm going to tell you there's times where I wouldn't answer either way, but it's basically pick the better of the two answers. So there's no true right or wrong. You're not scored right or wrong. It's really just brain works and things of that nature for the position. So no, unfortunately, there's no way to prep for that assessment.
The next question follows up on that pretty well. Can an applicant take the assessment more than once after a certain period of wait time?
No, it's only going to allow you to take it once. So once you submit it, the link that you have will no longer work. That's not to say that down the road, 6 months from now, if you apply to another position, that it wouldn't prompt you to retake the assessment.
There is a perception that there is no need to apply because the hiring manager already has someone in mind. What do you respond to someone who has the beliefs that belief set?
In the past, where we didn't have USAJobs and there wasn't the application process with eligibilities and the assessments, there was a lot of upfront recruiting. However, with announcements that are posted to USAJobs, those are true vacancies. If they had someone in mind, there's different avenues for hiring that they can go forward with. So we always recommend that you go in and apply to the positions, because there's always going to be times where someone knows somebody that's applying, but they put a lot of, like, they have to do certain questions when they interview. There's certain things that they have in place to prevent that, and has made great strides to ensure that we don't have any upfront recruiting for positions. We see lots of people who apply who never thought that they'd get hired, that they figured that someone else's friend or family member would get hired over them. It's a perception we're working very hard to change. That when there's a job out there, that they don't see any personal information when they get the resumes, and they are highly encouraged to show documentation of how they qualified and ranked people, to ensure that they can show why that person was chosen over another one. When we do panel interviewing, everyone is scored, so that it's very transparent with how they made that decision to hire one person over another. Can I say 100% that there's not times where people, because they know someone got a position? I can't say that that doesn't happen. However, we do have things in place to help prevent that.
Perfect. Can you touch on job postings that have a very long open date? Is it true that employers are gathering applications for future open positions, and there is actually a position, actually a position currently open?
If you see an announcement that is open for more than a week or two, that's open for 6 months, those aren't true vacancies. Those are resume collectors to basically, if they have a fill that they want to fill, they can pull from those lists of applicants that are already out there ready to go to expedite the hiring process. Those announcements are also used for announcements because there are some positions that have different hiring authorities. So when, for instance, contracting specialists, I'm not sure if you guys saw, I know that they've done some big job fairs, the base has, over the past couple years, where they have people go in and beforehand submit their resumes and things ahead of time before the fair, and they do on-the-job interviews and hiring. A lot of those resume catchers are used for that purpose. But no, they are not true vacancies. Sometimes they'll go full 6 months and they won't hire from those announcements. However, they do a lot hire through those, but they're not going to get any kind of confirmation or any kind of notification unless they are truly have a vacancy and they select them. So there's not as much communication about those positions. But a lot of positions that have high turnover or that they have volume for hiring, they'll use those long announcements.
Perfect. The next. So the next question, What percentage of the resumes get rejected by the USAJobs applicant tracking system?
Do they mean because of errors that the applicants make, or?
I would assume just there's normally a good number of some statistics that normally come out of an ATS. So would you say 1 in 10 get kicked out, or 1 in 10 get successful to push through?
That's kind of hard to say. For positions that are open to all USA citizens, I would say only 1 in 10 may get kicked back. But we find that there's a large population when there's certain requirements for positions that applicants get kicked back, where you might find it more up to 3 in 10 or 4 in 10, depending on the type of position.
Perfect. What would you tell a student about the pros and cons of being a civilian versus a contractor?
Well, a couple of different pros would be working as a federal employee, the retirement system that they'd be working towards. Many times, our benefits packages for federal employees is quite robust. Our leave policies, our retirement plans, and there's a lot of growth and mobility with our federal positions, because they can they take a federal position, but say they want to move to New York or to another state, they can move around a little bit more easily to other locations, and they're not stuck within one position. It also opens up growth for jobs, because we may not have, each base has different positions and different levels of positions, so that they can grow and develop and expand their knowledge base. You won't necessarily see federal employees sit in the same position for their whole career. They'll move around. Whereas with contractors, one of the biggest thing with contractors is you have to fight for your contract each year. So if it's not renewed, you would be without a job, and you're employed by that contractor, not the base. So the requirements would be different. But with a contractor, you have more flexibility, that you can take work on whatever contracts you want, wherever you want as well. And they're specific to certain areas, so you'd be limited to that as well.
Perfect, thank you. It doesn't seem like there were any other questions that came in. If anyone has any last minute questions, please type them in now.
Hey, Erin, this is Cassie Barlow. I went ahead and posted the link to the PowerPoint slides there on our associate website. I had that question from several people. And I just want to take one more opportunity to thank you for hosting us today, and to thank Cassie. That was really an awesome brief, lots of great information, and the colleges and universities will be able to continue to use their slides as they're out there on our website. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And certainly you've got our email address at Sochi. So if you have any other questions or have any other needs regarding this topic, please reach out and let us know. So thanks to everybody for being here today. Did we have any other questions, Erin, or was that it?
There was one question that just came in.
Okay, perfect.
What would you say to students who don't normally have the patience to go through the USAJobs systems and deal with a long wait?
I don't know that that's specific just to students. Applicants can get overwhelmed with filling a lot of the documents and questionnaires, so that you're not having to repeat yourself each time. But one thing that I tell them is, in the long run, when you can retire and you're not in your 90s to retire or not work anymore, waiting the 10 minutes or 15 minutes to apply for a position will be worth it in the end for the job security, because that's one thing that I have loved with working for the federal government is anytime we've had cuts for positions, they find us homes in other organizations. I've never seen anyone, even when we take budget cuts, lose a position or walk out the door. So the job security in the end is worth the hassle of sitting and having to go through the long application process.
Erin, we had another question coming in regarding the direct hire, and I want to point something out on the federal employment website that we created, because there is a place where students can upload their resume directly to the civilian personnel system on our website. And that is where the hiring officials go to for the direct hire opportunities. So if people can take a look at our website under the full-time work side of the page, there's a place where people can upload resumes directly to those direct hire authorities. So thank you so much for that question, whoever asked that, because that's a really, really good question. And I would recommend that students upload the resumes as well as fill out a profile. Cassie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I do. That is a great thing that you put out there for them, Cassie, because that's a question we get a lot of times is how do we get into applying to those direct hire? I recommend that they keep their transcripts as well and supply their transcripts when they apply to those, because a lot of times make sure to also create a LinkedIn account, because LinkedIn they use as well for the direct hire positions.
Yeah, and let me answer that next question too. So on that, regarding what they're specifically uploading their resume for, they can specifically request, certain parts of the country that they're applying to, specific jobs, obviously, that they qualify for within that part of the country. So it's not like you're just throwing your resume out there and applying for everything. So that's another good question.
I just want to say you all have out there on the slides is my email. So if you do have questions that come up, please feel free to shoot me an email right now. Email is the best way to get in contact with me because we're not in the office. But if you have questions or your students have questions, I'm happy to answer those along the way.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Cassie, for your time, and thanks to Erin as well for hosting us today. If there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and sign off now, and appreciate again everybody being here with us today. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.